Hello and welcome to the Federal. This is your host for the program, Off the Beaten Track. My name is Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay. Wherever we look at in any direction in India, Northeast, Manipur, there has been violence going on for the past 3 months. Very close to the Indian capital, right almost touching the borders in Haryana, you have violence going on for the last several days. We really do not know how long it is going to continue, where the next episode is going to start. It's really ironical that in a country where you have possibly the three biggest icons of peace, Gautam Buddha, the Buddha, Ashoka, and Mahatma Gandhi, there we are turning out to be possibly one of the most violent nations, always at the throats of each other. What is the reason for this? How is it damaging us? Is there actually a way out of this at all or not? These are very important questions, and I'm going to be asking precisely these to the eminent political scientist Neera Chandhoke, who has been in Delhi University in the past. She was a professor of political scientist, writer of numerous books. Most importantly, about a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, she came out with a very important book which actually clinically analyzed violence in our society. The book was titled Violence in Our Bones. Since the time the book came out, I was always looking for an opportune moment to discuss violence in India with you, Professor Chandhoke. Finally got the opportunity and the occasion also, if I can actually use such a word, because of what has been happening in Manipur and what has now suddenly taken over the Indian capital right next to it. New Mewat, a region of hybrid culture in this country where you have actually Hindus and Muslims at the throats of each other. Let me start with you. First of all, thank you very much for coming and joining us on this program.
Thank you.
I would go back to what I said. We are the country of the Buddha, of Ashok, and of Mahatma Gandhi. Then why this permanent illness, violence in our society? Why are we all the time angry with one another? Wherever you go on a road, you find a driver in the rage. You look at various communities and places, they're not at peace with one another, always caught up in a race of, in a mutual race. What is the reason for this?
It's always struck me as very strange that in the scriptures, the word ahimsa is mentioned so often, particularly in the context of the Mahabharata.
That's right.
The need to control your impulse to violence is very much a part of the objectives that any Hindu should aspire to, along with satya and ahimsa. And there's a very interesting anecdote which is recounted by the philosopher Professor Matilal in his Epics and Ethics, taken out of the Mahabharata. There is a hermit called Kaushika who has always sworn to tell the truth. He's obeying the notion of the objective of satya. Now he's standing by a crossroads, and a group of travelers rush by, pursued by bandits. The bandits, knowing of his reputation for honesty and truth, ask him which way the travelers had gone. And he, true to his vow, points toward the direction. Now the bandits, of course, loot the travelers and kill them.
Right.
And Kaushika does not go to heaven, which is his stated objective of always speaking the truth. Now Matilal says the important point is that there are two goals that the good Hindu must fulfill, satya and ahimsa. This man followed the goal of satya, but he forgot about ahimsa. And that always struck me, that if you're speaking the truth, but that truth leads to violence, you are culpable. So how do you maneuver your way between these two objectives, which contradict each other? Because Hindu Dharma does not allow for 10 commandments, which you shall do this, you shall not do this.
That's right.
You have to constantly make your way. However, what we are speaking of today is not the impulse to violence in our bones individually. We are speaking of the society in which we live. And I think the whole process starts at the end of the 19th century with the introduction of the Local Councils Act. Now, Hindus go to Tilak and say that since the representation of Indians onto the local councils was according to religion, they are more Muslims, so you must also organize the Hindus, which he does by creating public spectacles of what used to be personalized religion.
That's right. You're talking about the Ganesh Utsav.
Ganesh festival and Shivaji festival, and also in Bengal, the making of the puja on a very big scale.
Going out from inside the home to the public,
Exactly. Secondly, on Ram Navami, and this is, Ram Navami violence is not new to India.
No.
A procession is taken out. It diverts. It's so familiar, the whole chronology, because we saw it in Haryana, I knew. It diverts, goes into Muslim households. There's communal violence. It is the first instance of communal violence. It all comes out of representation. We have to say this with great sorrow, that the whole notion of representation on the basis of caste and community leads to violence. And I think this is exactly what happened in Manipur with the Metis, who are Hindu, asking for the status of a scheduled tribe. The Cookies felt that these guys are encroaching upon our reservations in educational institutions and in jobs, and violence followed. Now, there is a role of rumor we must attribute large-scale violence. So when there are any number of entrepreneurs, merchants of hate, who make an idea of the surprising part is that these rumors demonize the other. I was just looking at Voltaire. I mean, Voltaire, the Enlightenment philosopher, says, truly, whosoever is able to make you absurd is able to make you unjust. The more popular version is that if they can make you believe absurdity, they can lead you to injustice. So the role of rumor has played a very large part in Manipur. And in Haryana, as far as I can see, because the idea that Muslims are coming to attack the community and so on and so forth. So I'll stop here. That is it.
There are several points which you made. You referred to Tilak. You talked about as to how a very personalized religion, a festival, became a public spectacle. That is what happened precisely in between 1893 and 94. I was just today, I was actually going through my old writings and actually discovering that it exactly started in reaction to the riots in Bombay in 1893.
Bombay, yes.
Tilak,
and Bombay had never had a riot.
And Bombay didn't have riots, that's right. And it basically started along with the celebration of Ganesh Chaturthi as a public spectacle. Along with that, the boycott of Muharram, the festival of Muharram, started, which had a fairly large number of Hindus present. In fact, there are, police and other British departmental reports which talk about the presence of a large number of Hindus in these functions. So it was actually both ways, because Hindus and Muslims had not really been at the throats of each other all the centuries that Islam existed in India, after making an advent here in the, towards 1000 AD, that's the period when it came and started making its presence, creating a permanent presence. Now, there's one thing which I want to talk about, what is happening in Haryana. You talked about processions, and along with that, this idea of music in front of a mosque. This is about 150 years old, essentially started from 1860s. And from that time onwards, you get reports from across country. You also have reports from there is a report which I came across from the Pioneer newspaper, which is dated the 1880 somewhere, I think it's 1882 or 84, which talks about in Salem, a communal riot because it was provoked by a group of Hindus who wanted to play some music outside a mosque, to which the Muslims objected. And then there was a riot which led to large-scale devastation and killings of Muslims in that locality. Same kind of things that happened even in Nuh in Haryana, where on Monday, it was a Monday, supposed to be the last Monday of the month of Sawan, which is important for the Hindus, at least in North India. They say that we bring out a procession. So they decide the route which actually goes through various what are called Muslim ilake, the localities, and stopping in front of mosque and suddenly becoming more aggressive than they are. This has been going on for a long time. It happened in 1894, it happened in the 1920s, and was one of the causative reasons as to which led to the formation of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS, in 1925. So we have seen this. We have seen this also through the Ayodhya agitation, that how processions through Muslim localities was always used as a spark, as a trigger to light up a communal conflagration. Do you think that this is always done with some kind of a political event in front, which is actually necessary to mobilize? At the moment, you have already preparatory work being made about the 2024 parliamentary elections. Do you think that this is somehow the other connected with that if people are polarized on the basis of the religious identity, it is going to benefit the ruling party, that is the BJP, more than the others?
Nilanjan, I'm not able to actually think about what's going to happen in 24. I fear, I hope we don't see India as a giant cremation ground and a giant burial ground at all the people being killed. I think we have to trace the origins of violence actually to the national movement. You see, the 50 years which preceded the national movement was a period what we call the Bengal Renaissance. You'll be familiar with this. You come from there. And the Bengal Renaissance, the Bengal Renaissance, every society goes through this period. Who am I? And in response to the colonial onslaught onto Hindu identity. It's always puzzling me when Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who was an Arabic scholar, a Persian scholar, looks back to history to construct Indian identity. He overlooks the Mughal Empire, which in a very important sense was also the period of fusion. The Mughals brought a lot. We created the Khayal in Aurangzeb's court, apparently. I was just reading some French scholars, and they said Aurangzeb himself never listened to music, but he was personal piety, but his darbar was, he was a great patron of music. How is it that a very big lack in our mainstream national movement, and then in the 50s, the entire thing shifts to Maharashtra and Tilak. And I've always wondered whether this lack of attention to Muslims has led to the polarization. But today we see a very different phenomena.
Kind of polarization and violence.
Today we see a phenomena where a party which is organically linked to ideological group devoted to a very peculiar form of Hinduism, because I don't even think they know what Hinduism is. Probably Jawaharlal Nehru wrote more on Hinduism than these guys. Have the express objective of creating a Hindu Rashtra. Now, though, they're following Israel, creating kind of a community. What is a Hindu is also a big puzzle, because the caste issue is completely neglected.
Right.
I just wonder what has happened to the Dalit movement. It has somehow stemmed down. I was asking a friend in Hyderabad, what happened to the Dalit movement? She said they're all become very personalized. There's some fear, there is some trepidation. So they have, when you try to create a nation or recreate a nation, and they're trying to bury the Nehruvian notion of living together in peace and harmony, syncretic culture, you demonize the other community. Mewat is region, as far as I know, is not known for communal violence.
No, it is a place which was known for dual religious identity for a very long period of time.
People, even in the census, I read that they didn't know whether to say Hindu or Muslim.
Yes.
So,
Mewat and Kutch were two regions in India which was actually very particularly known for dual religious identity till very recently.
Is Mewat. And then, in Punjab, for instance, I've done some work on Punjab, and there are any number of shrines, Sufi shrines. You see Malerkotla, which is borders Patiala, which had the highest range of violence, has never had a communal riot. It is due to nobody. A few people did migrate to Pakistan. And it is due to oral history. It is due to the benediction of Guru Gobind Singh to the Nawab, because he had intervened when Guru Gobind Singh's sons were being bricked over. They lived in complete amity. But now when we started looking at Malerkotla, the BJP had set root there.
Hmm.
And suddenly there was this tension coming up, and it was a little worrying. In Punjab, you see Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, whatever few Muslims there, Malerkotla is 90% Muslim,
Yes.
they worship at the same shrine. They worship in different ways.
That's right.
Muslims don't touch their forehead to the shrine. Shri Sadruddin, Baba Sadruddin, who founded Malerkotla, Hindus and Sikhs, they all worship. There's a big mela. Why is our leadership breaking up this culture of living together? I can't understand. Why a political elite wants to break up the country, the amity? Why do they want murder on their hands? Their hands are red with blood. You know, if you remember Macbeth, and they say every new day somebody dies.
I do understand, the pain which you are expressing. In fact, Punjab is very interesting because I had a couple of months back, I was speaking to a scholar who has actually studied syncretic culture in Punjab and was talking about that how after independence and partition, when the majority of Muslims went away, for a few years, for the first 4, 5, 6 years, these shrines, not Muslim shrines, the Sufi shrines, in fact, we should not say the Muslims, the Sufi shrines, were kind of neglected, but thereafter its upkeep was taken up by the Sikhs and by the Hindus, and then it became thriving. And now you can actually, as you said, even when having driven through Punjab, at least during those years when it was the hotbed of militancy, while traveling, reporting on those things, it came across this innumerable Sufi shrines where we found that Hindus and Muslims would all gather for during the Urs. So that is there. But
Qadian, sorry, just to interrupt.
Yeah.
Qadian, the head of the Ahmadiyya sect, is in Punjab.
That's right. Exactly.
Qadian and Malerkotla, Muslim majority regions. And when we went to Punjab and we were studying conflict, outside of Tarantaran, there is a shrine. Suddenly we saw a big fair going on. What's happening? This anniversary of Baba Lakhan, who was given a boon by Guru Nanak. And there were Sikh women holding platters, accompanied by band baja, going to this little shrine which had a small oil lamp. And we said, so she asked me, where have you come from? I said, I've come from Delhi. Have you come to ask a boon? I said, no. She said, he gives everything to everyone. So that is the way Punjab was, despite the partition. Why are these people splitting the country? I can't understand why Haryana happened. You're taking out a procession and you're chanting provocative slogans.
Professor Chandhoke, so let me ask you, trying to understand the types of violence. We know that there is communal violence. We know that there is caste violence in the country. We know that there is gender violence within the family. We keep on hearing about these horror stories about, khap panchayats, ordering the murder of young girls or boys who have actually married each other, again, outside the caste. We now hear the Gujarat government getting very fancy ideas of making it mandatory to get approval from the families before they can get married. So you have all kinds of obnoxious rules which are being passed out in terms of social norms. But this is all leading to different kinds of violence. As somebody who has studied violence, how do you categorize the different types of violence in the country?
You see, of course, you have the notion of structural violence, which is, of course, that the violence is built into the structure, and it is built into the whole notion of, it is built into, because your country is very unequal. And this inequality breeds violence. I'm not very sure whether the notion of intention is covered by the notion of structural violence. I would see political violence as completely intentional. I do not believe the government doesn't know that violence is on the horizon. Arms are stockpiled, rumors make their way. And for a surveillance state not to know that violence is building up in Manipur or Haryana, it's completely unbelievable. Studies on communal riots have held that where the government doesn't want it, riots do not happen.
Right.
It doesn't happen where the government can stop it. You remember Lalu Prasad stopping the procession of
Yeah, in
Advani?
fact, can I just interrupt you to make
Yeah.
actually a very important thought which came to my mind, just share it with you. For a long period of time, the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, used to take immense pride in the fact that there are no communal riots in those states where we are in power.
Mm.
But in the recent years, especially now, we have seen violence taking place in Manipur. They are in power. In Haryana, they are in power. There has been violence even in Uttar
Maharashtra.
Pradesh, in Maharashtra. So wherever the BJP has been in power, there have been communal riots. And as many of its critics point out, that these are possibly also those places where the BJP might be finding it a bit electorally tough in the next round. That is possibly the reason as to why they are allowing things to drift along so that people get polarized on religious lines. Anyway, this was just a thought which came to my mind.
Yes.
So,
Yes. You
so
see,
please continue.
yeah, I would suggest when the editor of LF asked me to write a book on violence in our bones,
Right.
I started wondering, do we have violence in our bones? And the human psyche is very, very complex, as any detective novelist will tell you. But there's a distinct distinction between the impulse to violence and actual violent acts.
Right.
You can hear somebody say, oh God, I wish they die, but you don't go and kill them. That transition from an impulse, sentiment, or a passion, or irrational it may be, to an act requires a trigger. And that trigger is provided by ideology and people who are committed and people who have immunity from punishment. I sometimes wonder what is the social background of these young men, and they are mainly men, who take these processions out. Do they not have jobs? I mean, what are they doing on the streets, taking out processions, shouting provocative slogans? They're probably employed by the local politician or the local whatever man wants to be close to power. But what is their sociological profile? Why is this improved? And it is that when this guy who was held responsible for the violence in Haryana, Monu something, I forget his second name.
Monu Manesar, that is the nickname.
Yes, Manesar. He
Yeah.
pointed to somebody else. He said that guy was supposed to come. So here you have the role of rumor, provocative slogan. We haven't changed much since the pre-partition days. The same thing used to happen. That, there would be rumors, there would be music before the mosque, there would be a piece of beef thrown into a temple and people would erupt. It has to do with the notion of the nation who owns the nation. Who is the owner of the nation? The nation state has been, and it's more important when you know that your nation is going to become a state, because the nation politically organizes itself into a state. Right. I think this happened prior to partition, and this is happening. This is our nation. The nation state has been considered to be one of history's most serious mistakes. Because everywhere you see in Europe, what is the right wing coming to power everywhere, anti-immigration. In France, the only difference, Harshmander had a piece in The Wire yesterday, is that even Trump expressed grief at that young African-American being killed by the police. What was his name? Where the police ground his heel into his face.
Right. Some years ago it happened.
Yes. Even Trump expressed sorrow. Normally a statesman would say, I feel sorrow, my heart goes out to you.
Yes, but he did not express any regret in the storming of the Capitol Hill, not refusing
No, he did.
to accept the verdict of the 2020
No, he did.
elections.
I mean, he did many wrong things, but at the death of a young man, he did express grief and national grief. I mean, I know that the Prime Minister said the country is ashamed. Of course, we are ashamed that in front of us this is happening. Shouldn't the government be ashamed of not being able to prevent this? I mean, somewhere we have to hold the government culpable. We have to hold it accountable. What is happening?
let us move away from, yes, what you are saying, that structured violence, there is definitely some amount of culpability from the government side, and also maybe from the other political parties side
It is
also. We
possible.
actually get down.
It
It's
is.
not that even in West Bengal, where we had recently had the local body elections, panchayat elections, the kind of violence which took place,
Yeah,
it is
true.
completely at odds with what you were
True.
talking about, Bengal Renaissance, undoing everything that happened in terms of social reform at that point. Bengal is today possibly one of the most violent, political violence is possibly
It
among the
is.
worst there. So let's also move to personal violence. We also are seeing that we are becoming a huge collective of citizens who are always on a short fuse. The recent uh, railway police force personnel in the train who woke up early in the morning, had a bit of an altercation with somebody, got into an argument with his colleagues, and then traveled from coach to coach, selectively identifying Muslims and shooting them down. The amount of rage which is there within the heart, first of all, where is this rage and this hatred coming from? Second is that should there not be some kind of a clearance mechanism to ensure that people who are driven by such anger should not be in any position of power in the country, especially not in police with firearms in their hands.
Yeah. Watching at the recent seminar on hate speech, watching the videos made of people of men making terrible speeches, what frightened me was not that somebody clad in a particular color was issuing a call to arms. What frightened me was the rapture on the face of the audience. There were people leaning from a flyover to hear him. Now, it is like somebody listening to a guru, and here the guru is not telling you to be at peace with yourself. The guru is saying, go kill. And we have any number of these. It was in Maharashtra, and it was in one more place, which I forget.
Right.
What was scared by the way they were captivated by the speaker, and what set off this I wouldn't even call it ideology, this passion to kill the other community. Because this police-wala, he couldn't have been mentally so unstable that he couldn't distinguish between a Hindu and a Muslim. He distinguished, he identified
he must
Muslims
have
as
been
killing them.
in a fairly rational.
Yes, and he killed his superior so that he wouldn't be stopped. Now, all over, whether it is on news or whether it is these guys, these Mahants issuing calls for violence, there are hundreds of people enwrapped in them. And I actually wonder what has caught their mind. Is that an explanation for their own poverty, their own deprivation, that some other community is cornering a part of what is due to you? We are living in a very violent atmosphere. And that violence is impelling people personally. It's like patriarchy. When you listen to stories of domestic abuse, men feel entitled to do anything.
Entitlement is always there.
Yeah, in Nirbhaya case, the BBC interviewed one of the guys who'd been arrested, and he said, what was she doing out at night with a boy? You think women should be in the kitchen. It is an ideological thing.
But this is something which is said even very routinely in society by a large number of people.
It is said very openly. And there's one more point. What surprises me, when in the 19th century, the whole notion of Hindu religion was evoked, it was attached to a project of social reform. Howsoever problematic may be the Arya Samaj or the Brahmo Samaj, it was an issue of women
remarriage, age of consent, all those issues of reforms.
It was they took up reform issues, howsoever problematic they may be. I think they took up. I know my family is Arya Samaji, and how much attention was paid to women's education.
Right.
Today again, Hinduism is being evoked, but where is that spirit of social reform?
I think that there is a backward movement.
It is a backward movement. They're launching into superstition.
We're going back.
They're going back. They're regressing. We have regressed. We are getting into all kinds of superstitions and babas, and there is no rationality left. No one to tell them that,
Let me take you somewhere else, trying to also move towards wind up this conversation. When we speak about violence and it actually reaching the kind of levels which is there at the moment, which is really upsetting, a lot of people, who are connected somehow or the other with state power at the moment say that, why are you unnecessarily looking at violence? It has always been there. After all, history wouldn't have been there if there had been no violence. I remember this very categorical statement made by somebody who's fairly important within the current political regime, that there wouldn't have been any history if there had not been any violence. This Mahabharata would not have happened if there was no war. The Ramayana wouldn't have happened if Ravan had not kidnapped Sita. So there has always been violence. So why do you have to look at it? It's actually, violence is a form of progress and moving towards, giving better shape to the existing conflicts which are there within society, which we do not want to face. That is what was said.
I think what they forget is that both these epics, not that I'm a great expert, were ultimately about justice. It was about justice. But there is no mention of justice. In fact, this is about injustice. These are our fellow countrymen. These are our fellow citizens. I mean, we are bound into a political community by the Constitution. And the one web series which actually shook me up was Dahad, where this young woman, Sonakshi Sinha, who plays a sub-inspector, is not allowed into a Thakur's household.
So
he says, no, you can't. She's a lower caste.
Yes.
So she looks at him and says, I will go, the Constitution allows me to do so. And that suddenly struck me because we're all doing short series on the Constitution. It's a very good introduction that there is a different way to live. Why would we live amidst bloodshed and hate and all that comes with all the baggage that comes with it? Why can't anybody come up and preach peace and live in harmony? I'm afraid our leaders, and I'm not only talking about this party, I'm talking about other parties, they have inculcated hate. They have.
It's sheer coincidence, that you have kind of led me on to which I had actually thought would be my last question. That how do we end violence, in what direction can we move? And you just said that you actually live by the Constitution, and that's your answer. That actually the Constitution possibly is the finest guiding light as to how one can actually leave all this violence behind and try to actually have a better tool to go and face the future.
Narendra Modi is such a popular leader.
He is.
He has to just say one word, stop it.
That's
not
right.
in my name. Because that murder was committed in his name and Yogi Adityanath's name. Or somebody like Amitabh Bachchan has to get up, or Shah Rukh Khan. Shah Rukh Khan probably won't. He'll be vilified. But just say, stop it. In 46,
Amitabh Bachchan did say something about the kind of cinema that is being made, and
yeah, but that's not
spoke
enough.
about it. But
bus karo, bus. In 46, when there was a communal riot in Bombay, there was a procession taken out by IPTA.
Right.
In that procession was Balraj Sahni, who was a member.
That's right.
There was the entire Kapoor clan. Prithviraj Kapoor, who was an icon in his own right. Prithvi Theatre, Raj Kapoor, Shami Kapoor, and Devanand. I mean, I can't imagine Devanand being very political. I'm a bit of a Bollywood buff, but they were there saying, put an end to this violence. You can't take out a procession. You'll be the culprits. So in a way, there is, I think, our public figures, or one industrialist has to get up and say, please stop it. And one political, Mr. Modi has great power. He's a demagogue. He can get up and say, I want no more bloodshed in the country.
I think that's very well put. I really wouldn't hazard a guess that out of these, which one is most likely and who is going to be the least likely to say that. But thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts on something which is actually really causing a lot of rift within the country. Continuous violence. From one violent episode to another violence episode, we are seamlessly transiting. We hope that somebody who's a public figure will take the lead to say, not in my name, not in your name, not in anybody's name. Let's stop it. And that is the best way to take India forward. Thank you very
Mandela
much,
did it.
Professor.
Mandela said, enough of violence, no more.
That's
And they
right.
put down their arms. He had enough moral authority.
Right.
So a PM can do it. He should do it. I appeal to him via this thing. Please, Mr. Modi, intervene.
Let that be your last word, and thank you very much,
Thank
Professor
you.
Neera Chandhoke, for coming and joining
Thank
us on
you.
Federal.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.